understand why they would reject liberal policies. Why don't we have a more free market economy in which people can freelance, they can be self-employed and not get penalized, preferably for it, and things like that, and absorb those people, many of whom are skilled. You gotta understand, when we talk about, for instance, the homeless population, I realize that a large proportion of the homeless are either derelicts, they're addicted to something like that, or they're mentally ill. But there are people that are living under underpasses that would gladly take up a 9-to-5 job and move into, even if they had to live in the fucking pod, as Klaus Schwab wants them all to live in, and eat bugs and shit like that. At the very least, they would have a roof over their heads. They're willing to do that. They're just not enabled in order to do that. They're not given the opportunity.
Yeah, okay, alright. Yeah, okay. So, yeah. This is the same fucking thing that everyone else says. They're like, well, I understand that, most homeless people are just, crazy and addicted to drugs. Says Styx Hexenhammer. But there is a very, very small portion of these people who would actually work okay. Dude, it's just this is the same thing that all the liberals that Styx Hexenhammer claims he's opposed to say. It's the same. It's everybody. This is not unique. There is nothing unique about what he's saying. That's like me saying, I know that there's some people that don't think that the sky is blue. I mean, dude, and what he's saying about the homeless, you could say that same thing about politicians. Okay, watch, I'll show you. Okay, look, guys. Look, hear me out here, guys. I know that most politicians are just lazy, drug addict, losers. I'm right there with you guys. Most politicians, they're just bums. They don't work. They're fucking parasites that all they do is parasite off of your tax dollars. This is true. And they're fucking crazy as all fucking, they're as crazy as a shithouse rat. I'm right there with you guys. But there are some politicians that if you give them an opportunity to, make some positive changes in this country, they're going to do it. But they're not given these opportunities. They're not given the opportunities to be able to do their job as politicians. And that's why they're just lazy bums that just parasite off of your tax dollars and are partying, sniffing lines of coke off of, high-end prostitutes' assholes and are fucking crazy. But even though most politicians are like this, there are politicians that if they were given an opportunity, there's a small percentage of politicians that actually would do something. Okay, give you another example. Let's go with the Christians. Okay, guys, let me say something here, okay? I know that most of these Christians, most of these Christians are just total hypocrites that would throw you under the bus for a McDonald's sandwich if given the chance. I know most of these Christians, they're just totally insane. They're addicted to drugs. They're getting OxyContin from their doctor, complaining about the pain in their back, and they're addicted when really they're just fucking OxyContin drug. I know. Yes, these Christians, they're totally insane, mentally ill, chronic mental illness with most of these Christians. But there is a very small percentage of these Christians worldwide, this massive population of Christians, that if given the chance, they would actually do good stuff. They would get off the OxyContin that they're getting from their doctor, they would stop being hypocrites and actually walk their talk if given the chance. And, I feel sorry. Okay, let's do. I'll just pick any random group. Okay, truckers. Look, guys, I just want to say this. Okay, I know that in the trucking industry today, that they'll just hire anybody. They'll hire a dot head, a zipper head, a chink. They don't care. They'll buy him a fucking license at the fucking Toys R Us, Kmart, and the majority of these truckers, they're fucking retards. They're blocking up traffic. They don't even know how to drive. The trucker industry has been completely destroyed for the most part. Like it's just a bunch of retards that don't even know how to drive. Okay, I know. But there is a small percentage of truckers that are actually decent, and if given the chance to actually do they wouldn't be, blasted out on crystal meth, up fucking on crystal meth for 48 hours, driving like a maniac, if given the chance, who else? You can say this about anybody, any group of people. Look, guys, the middle class. I want to say this about the middle class, okay? I know that a lot of the middle class, they're just sheeple. They don't even really, they're just robots, okay? They don't really know. They blindly vote for Trump because they don't even understand politics, they're clueless. They're like robots. They go to work, they pull a lever. I know, but there is a small percentage of middle class people that if given the chance, they would do all kinds of stuff. They would be, they could do better than Trump if given the chance at being the president. You can say this about anybody. Okay, look, guys, I want to say something about the working class, okay? Now, I know that the working class, they're just, the majority of them are just hamburger flippers at McDonald's. And we all know these hamburger flippers, they're pretty fucking stupid, okay? And they don't take any pride in their work. They're just hamburger flippers. Okay? But see, first of all, of course, we need hamburger flippers because who's going to cook our hamburgers? So you just gotta deal with it, with these working class schmucks, okay? But I want to say, there is a small percentage of these working class people that if given the chance, they would actually take pride in their job. And they'd actually be better at something. They're qualified to do more than just flip burgers. And if given the opportunity, they would be, they would rise above the hamburger flipper status and become, middle lower class. They go from like flipping hamburger to, managing a Macy's or something. because that's where they're at. But and it's a small percentage. Most working class, they're just flip the hamburger, clean the toilets for the janitor, vacuum the floors in the high-rise building. We know this, okay? But there is a small percentage, dude, it's dumb. So going back to Stick, he's like, okay, guys, look, I know that most homeless people they're just lazy, retarded drug addicts, with needles hanging out of their arms behind a dumpster. Okay, I know. But there is some of these people living under bridges that if they were given an opportunity, they could flip a burger or something. They could flip a burger, maybe even manage Mervin's or something. Okay? I mean, they may not be able to be as good as me because I'm Styx Hexenhammer, I can be a drug addict and mentally ill and still be awesome. That's how awesome I am. I'm a mentally ill drug addict that's totally mentally sound and not addicted to drugs, even though I'm a drug addict who's mentally ill. That's how awesome I am. I'm just this anomaly. Okay, most people couldn't be me because I'm Styx Hexenhammer. Yeah, I mean, you could say this about any group of people. Look, guys, I know that most Buddhists, they're not even really Buddhists. They just like to wear the hippie, trippy Buddha clothes and walk around, floating around, acting like they're some Buddhist guru. I know, guys. But there is a small percentage of Buddhists, people that claim to believe in Buddhists, that actually they have a spirit. They actually are growing spiritually. Maybe not as much as a pagan like me, because I'm Styx Hexenhammer, who I believe in the occult and pagan stuff. They're never going to be as good as me. But there are a small percentage of people that claim to be Buddhists that actually do have some spiritual value. Even though most of them, I know most of these Buddhists, they just wear hippie, trippy. They just like to wear the hippie, trippy Buddhist shirt with the Buddha on the front, and walk around barefoot and with long hair and a beard and a joint hanging out of their mouth and just act like they're some guru. I know most of these Buddhists are like this, but there is a small percentage of it. You could say this about the whole world. Okay, guys, look, I want to say something about the population of the world. Okay, I know. Okay, that 99% of the world's population are just a bunch of NPC automaton sheeple that have no awareness. They just are robots that do what they're told and lick the boot and grovel for shekels. Okay, I know this, that 99% of the world's population, they're just a bunch of NPC sheeple. They're just total robots, pulling levers, pushing buttons. They don't take red pills. They're not wearing They Live sunglasses. They're just totally clueless. I know that 99% of the world's population is this. But there is a small percentage of the population that, they're a victim of this sheeple mentality, this global sheeple mentality. And if this small population were actually not surrounded by sheeple, they could change the world. They could open everyone's eyes. I know that most of the people in the world are just NPC sheeple. I know this. But there is a small percentage who, under the right circumstances, could transform our world into a utopia if given the chance. See how you can say the same thing Styx Hexenhammer is saying about the homeless. You can say it about the entire population of the earth. I know that most people on the earth are just brain dead sheeple that just operate on the non-player character handbook. That's all. They're just totally brainwashed. I know. But there is a small percentage of these people that are not It really is. A small percentage of the entire population on the earth. There's a small percentage that aren't. Just like I know that most of these homeless people, they're just like NPC sheeple. But there is a small percentage of these homeless people that are living under bridges, that if you give them an opportunity, man, they can flip a burger. They can flip a burger like nobody's business, okay? So that'll do it for this episode of another Angry Hobo channel with your host, Angry Hobo. Remember, stay tuned, stay informed, stay salty, and monetize.